Bienvenue.
Welcome to the 80th meeting of the Standing Committee on Official Languages for Thursday, May 9, 2013. We are here pursuant to Standing Order 81-4 to review the main estimates, for the Office of the Official Languages Commissioner.
There's agreement from members of this committee. Then in light of the fact that we only have one witness today, and we're only dealing with one vote on the estimates, that will adjourn at 5 o'clock today. That will allow members an hour and 20 minutes to ask questions or to provide comments to the committee. And before we give the floor to Mr. Fraser, I understand that Madame Michaud would like to have the floor. Madame Michaud, vous avez la parole.
You have the floor. Thank you very much. I just have a question to inform the committee of something. We'd asked Minister Kenny to appear before the committee. We were told that he would appear before Easter and then in May, but we still don't have a date. Have you been informed of when the minister could appear before the committee? I have no dates. But are you still looking into trying to get him here? Yes. Because important issues are at stake, so if we could see him before the end of the parliamentary session, that would be greatly appreciated. Second, I have two notices of motion which I'd like to table today. The first, that the committee invite the Office of the Privy Council with regard to the appointment process by the Governor and Council for 2 hours with regard to language matters before June 2013. Second notice of motion, that the committee hold a public meeting as soon as possible and at the latest by June 1st of this year to respond to the concerns expressed by Parliament's senior officials in the letter of September 2011. Addressed to the Standing Committee on Official Languages of the House of Commons with regard to their independence and insofar as concerns the official languages. Thank you, Ms. Michaud, for your notices of motions. We will discuss both motions after the break. That is, we will debate them on Tuesday, May 21st.
Clarification. We're aiming to finish at 5 o'clock, but if there are still questions that are wanting to be asked after that time, we can still ask those questions?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Without further ado, Mr. Fraser, you... yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not a regular member. I just want to make sure those motions will be sent to the normal member of the committee, right? That's the rule.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will ensure they're distributed to members of the committee, and we will discuss and debate those motions on the 21st of May when we return from our constituency week. Mr. Fraser?
Mr. Fraser, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And from the outset, I'd like to say I've got a bit of a sore throat, so if I lose my voice, I am well surrounded by people who can help me answer questions.
Committee on Official Languages, I would like to thank your committee for its interest in the operations of the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. As an agent of Parliament, I provide parliamentarians with unbiased advice based on objective and factual information. This is to help you hold the federal government accountable for its stewardship of the equal status of English and French in Canada. Je suis accompagné aujourd'hui de...
I am accompanied by Ms. Nancy Premdas, Assistant Commissioner, Corporate Management, Ms. Ghislaine Charlevoix, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Assurance, Mr. Sylvain Giguère, Assistant Commissioner, Policy and Communications, and Ms. Colette Lagacé, Director, Finance. The Office of the Commissioner has a budget of $23.9 million to support it in its mandate for 2013-2014. This amount includes $15.1 million in salaries, or 72% of the main budget. Our workforce consists of 163 full-time equivalents.
2014 take into account the loan of $2.8 million from the Treasury Board to pay the cost of moving our offices to Gatineau. This relocation will allow us to streamline our operations and examine the possibility of sharing resources with other agents of Parliament who will be located under the same roof. Les opérations du commissariat.
Our operations are divided into 3 program activities: protection of Canadians' language rights, promotion of linguistic duality, and internal services. I would suggest to you that we look at these activities one by one. To protect the language rights of Canadians, the Office of the Commissioner resolves complaints through investigations. It conducts audits, evaluates the performance of federal institutions, and intervenes in court when appropriate.
$5 million, which represents 27.4% of the total budget. The possible impacts of budget cuts on administrative programs and processes linked to official languages continue to preoccupy me. I will continue to observe the impacts of these budget cuts, both in Ottawa and in the regions. I will also continue to intervene based on what is revealed by our investigations and observations. D'autre part, je sais que les...
I know that the numbers in the last census raised some concerns in a number of Francophone communities across the country, and that's why we will analyze the impact of the 2011 census on bilingual services provided to official language communities by government offices across the country. During the 2013-14 fiscal year, the Office of the Commissioner will release the results of an audit on how the government fulfills its language obligations with respect to provincial transfers.
Review of the accountability process. The Office of the Commissioner will also publish audit follow-up reports for National Defence, Service Canada, and the Halifax Airport Authority. We will also begin 2 new audits. One will be a horizontal audit on the impacts of new service management models on official languages in a limited number of federal institutions. The other will be on Treasury Board Secretariat's role in the review of the impacts of proposed budget cuts on official languages. We will also follow up on 2 others, one on Air Canada and the other on Industry Canada. I will continue to use my authority to intervene before the courts when necessary. During the next year, I will act as joint appellant in the Thibodeau versus Air Canada case appealed to the Supreme Court. This is to ensure consistent interpretation of Air Canada's language obligations and the primacy of the Official Languages Act. La poursuite contre CBC Radio-Canada.
Court proceedings against CBC Radio-Canada are ongoing, and we'll be able to evaluate the next steps once the CRTC renders a decision on the renewal of CBC Radio-Canada's licenses, specifically the license for CBEF Windsor. In 2012-13, the Office of the Commissioner received 505 complaints from people who claimed that their language rights had been infringed. Of those complaints, 415 were admissible. To exercise our investigative powers in the most efficient way possible, we'll conduct a survey of the complainants and federal institutions involved. Also, since February 2013, the Office of the Commissioner has been providing the possibility of filing a complaint online.
In arrears. On April 1st, 2012, there were 624 complaint files that had been ongoing for more than a year, 437 of which involved a single incident. As of March 31st, 2013, only 69 of these files were still active. Expenditures linked to promotion of linguistic duality are $6.7 million, which represents 28% of the total budget. To promote linguistic duality, the Office of the Commissioner communicates regularly with parliamentarians, official language minority communities, federal institutions, and the Canadian public. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes profitent pleinement.
Canadians fully benefit from our research, our studies, the distribution of our information products, and our exchanges with many key stakeholders. Since September, these exchanges could take place on social media. The Office of the Commissioner now manages a Facebook page and a Twitter feed to promote the conversation with Canadians.
Will communicate regularly with federal institutions that anticipate making investments under the new roadmap. This will be done in order to better understand the expected results on the vitality of communities and the teaching of official languages. With the 150th anniversary of Confederation in 2017, I will follow up on recommendations from my last annual report aimed at raising the government's profile when it comes to linguistic duality in Canadian society. De plus, de 2013 à 2015.
Furthermore, from 2013 to 2015, we'll carry out an information campaign on the rights of the public who transit in the airports. 4 studies will be published this year. A study on the bilingual capacity of the Judiciary of Superior Courts, conducted in collaboration with the Ontario French Language Services Commissioner and the New Brunswick Commissioner of Official Languages. That report will be finished shortly, and the study will be a thorough examination of the federal judiciary appointment process, as well as the language training offered to Superior Court judges.
Public service, and another on English-speaking seniors in Quebec. In addition, we're working on a study on governor and council appointments. Lastly, we will look at a few potential study projects, such as a survey of Canadians on bilingualism, the possibilities of learning a second language in colleges and cégeps, and a literature review of the effects of social media on our official languages. Il est aussi important d'inciter le public canadien à célébrer la dualité.
It's also important to encourage the Canadian public to celebrate linguistic duality during various events everywhere in the country. For instance, this summer, my staff will be on hand throughout the Canada Games in Sherbrooke to promote Canada's linguistic duality to thousands of visitors. This effort will be part of a strategy, or rather is part of a strategy, to work with organizers of major events to ensure that they include Canada's linguistic duality in their planning.
It allows the Office of the Commissioner to bring together resources that support the organization as a whole, including asset management, finance, and human resources management. This activity has allocated a budget of $6.7 million, which is 28.2% of our total budget. This amount does not include the cost of technological updates, $1.1 million for this year, or the cost of moving to 30 Victoria, $2.8 million, which together represents 16.4%, or $3.9 million of our total budget for 2013-2014. Ces services.
These services, essential to any organization, ensure that taxpayers' dollars are used efficiently and transparently. In that vein, we have invested in new technological tools to optimize resources. For example, employees now rely on video and teleconferences to reduce the need for travel, increase productivity, and reduce operational costs significantly. Thank you for your attention, and I would now be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thanks, Mr. Fraser. Ms. Michaud. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being here, all of you. It's always a pleasure to welcome you. I'll begin with a subject which was studied by the Office of the Commissioner, the Quebec Search and Rescue Centre. It was in the news again today, and Mr. Commissioner, you have expressed your concern several times with regard to the closing of the Search and Rescue Centre, whereas Trenton and Halifax still don't have enough bilingual staff. Your staff followed up the implementation of your recommendations in April. So at this point, you could probably let us know whether DFO and the Coast Guard have implemented your recommendations. Have they done so, yes or no? Well, we haven't completed the follow-up. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Today we have a meeting on the main estimates. Are we moving away from our agenda? Are you going to ask questions on every subject under government? I just want to make sure that the government and the opposition will indeed ask questions with regard to the main estimates, because it seems that you've left the mandate of the meeting. If I may? In fact, Mr. Commissioner himself, in his presentation, referred to certain studies which the office undertook. So that is what I am alluding to. I am responding to comments made by Mr. Fraser, and Mr. Gould can speak to this when it is his turn to intervene. Thank you, Ms. Michaud and Ms. Gould. Ms. Michaud. Certainly has the latitude to decide which questions she will put. If she wishes to ask a question on the work carried out by the Official Languages Commissioner, that's fine.
Languages, I'm going to allow them. Make sure it's tied in some way to the official languages policy of the government and the department's or the office's spending, and I'll let the questions stand. Madame Michaud.
Je vous remercie. Alors, je vais vous laisser répondre, Monsieur Fraser.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Mr. Fraser. Well, as you said, Madame Michaud, when we follow up on recommendations made in our report, actually, with regard to the follow-up of recommendations, that's not finished yet. I'm following the process closely, and I've just received a draft, which is not completed. Can you tell us now whether the recommendations have been implemented or not without going into details, yes or no? Well, I can't speak to that until the follow-up is finished. We're looking at June to finish the follow-up, but until then, since we're still in the process of completing the follow-up, I cannot speak to that. When are you going to make that information available? Well, as I said, we're looking at June. Ghislaine? The follow-up report, as the Commissioner said, will be sent to the parties involved in the investigation in June. Well, then when will the report be made public? Well, since it's a follow-up report to an investigation, it will not be made public. Mr. Fraser, at that point, will you be able to share with us your conclusions or your impressions with regard to the situation? Well, there's a bit of a paradox here, because with regard to investigations and reports which follow up on these investigations, we are bound by confidentiality rules, but the complainants are not. So this means that the complainants can talk about their situation in public, but this leads to a difficult situation after, because you might be called upon to comment, right? Yes. We may respect confidentiality rules, but if the complainants make a document public, well, then we cannot not speak to that report. Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll see what the complainants do with the report, and we'll see whether you will be asked to comment on the situation then. My colleague Yvonne Godin had asked the office about the number of infractions committed by DFO over the last 3 years. When he asked the question, we did not get any answers. So, can you tell us why it is not possible to answer that question? Don't you number or count the number of violations reported to each department, violations to the Official Languages Act? Well, I think it was just a matter of time. We had to do the research, and indeed in 2012, 2013, there were 15 admissible violations. A large number led to investigations, and I can tell you which part of the Act was infringed. Perhaps you can send that in writing to the committee. We'd appreciate that. Sure, of course. But very briefly, let me tell you, in 2011, 2012, there were 13 and followed by 11 the following fiscal year. And we can give you more information on which parts of the Act were violated. That would be great. Thank you. Now, again, coming back to the Search and Rescue Center, you read today in the papers, as did everyone else, that the Minister of Fisheries would not confirm this, but it seems that the government might come back on its decision to close the center in Quebec. Have you gotten wind of this? Well, I don't want to go into details here, but I can tell you that in the course of the follow-up, I had conversations with the Deputy Minister and the Commissioner for the Canadian Coast Guard. I won't reveal the substance of those talks. But let me just say that we did have discussions with regard to the importance of delivering language services as per the original report. Mr. Gould? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Commissioner for being here today. I was looking at the budget between 2011-2012. You had just over $22 million, and in the main estimates for 2012-2013, a budget of just over 20 million. So there is a little decrease there, and I do understand that you moved offices. Can you tell us how you dealt with the reduction in your budget? What was done to deal with that? Well, in fact, we worked hard at managing our operations better, but I'll let Ms. Legacy give you more information on what exactly was done. Well, first in 2011-2012, we reviewed voted services just to define them more clearly. We wanted to make sure that all the money given to us was spent under our mandate. So 18 positions, in fact, were reassigned. And since then, we've analyzed all of our expenses, and we made cuts with regard in operational expenses. For instance, travel. We're traveling less. The Commissioner is now traveling in economy only. Has the number of employees changed, or is it about the same? Well, based on Treasury Board Secretariat rules, we have 177 FTEs, and now we're down to 163, so we cut 14.
In your presentation, Commissioner, you mentioned the number of complaints to be dealt with, or your backlog. 600 or so, and I think you mentioned 400 as well. Is there a way to group these, or do you deal with them on a case-by-case basis? It must cost a fair bit for each complaint, but if there are over 400 complaints and it's essentially dealing with the same subject matter, the same complaint, how do you manage that? Over the last few years, on a number of occasions, we've had incidents where that had led to a massive amount of complaints. The 400 complaints had to deal with Avios, which was Air Canada subsidiary. The complaints had to do with the right to work in French that were affected by this change in Air Canada structure. Before then, we had received 800 complaints regarding the decision by Radio-Canada CBC to close its production center in CBOF Windsor. That led to 800 complaints, as well as action before the courts as to their responsibility in these matters. So when there is a massive number of complaints that come in at one time, then they are grouped, but it often takes more significant investment in time. We have to have one analyst working on that, especially when it's a case like we had in Windsor with CBOF. It is quite possible that these matters would end up before the courts. But it's not necessarily more costly than when it's a complaint about a complex matter. It can take more time, more investment, more consultation with our lawyers. It could be a very complex investigation, even on the basis of a single complaint. So you can't really make a hard and fast rule as to the number of complaints and the cost. A question, perhaps I can defer to Ghislaine. To get back to the 437 complaints, it was really one single investigation. So we do group the files and we deal with one investigation. Of course, there is a large number of complaints in some cases, and it can happen that it will take a little longer for our office to deal with them. These are not individual investigations. In your presentation, you were mentioning some complaints that are in arrears. It conveys this impression that there are many of them that are in arrears. But if you have 437 that are grouped, then it's really perhaps not 600 complaints we're dealing with, maybe something more like 125 complaints. If you deal with each complaint individually, it might seem as though there's so many, but it's essentially the same complaint repeated many times. Each complainant has certain rights, so we do have to respond to each complaint individually. There's always a case that is open for each complaint. At the end of the process, each complainant also has a right to recourse if that complainant is not satisfied with the result of our investigations. That doesn't mean, however, that these 437 cases lead to investigations, but we do have to deal with them on a case-by-case basis because of the complainant's rights. So you can establish a mix then between the two options. The end result will probably be the same, but it won't necessarily cost as much as if it were a separate complaint. No, but we can't say we can't tell 436 people you missed the boat because there's another person who filed that complaint before you did, so your rights won't be taken into consideration. Each complainant's rights must be upheld, even if there's an investigation that's carried out on the same incident. It's not considered a class action measure if it's for the same complaint. How much time do I have left? Oh, very well, thank you. Mr. Pichetti.
Just a quick technical question is, in your brief, when you talk about how much is going to be spent on protection of language rights, the expenditures planned for this activity are 6.5 million. But when I look at the budget, I see for the protection of, I'm going from French, la protection des droits linguistiques, it's 6.
The protection of language rights?
And not 6.5. And then, is there a typo? And then on the promotion of linguistic duality, you're saying that you're going to be spending 6.7, but in actual fact it's 6.527? Has that been inverted? Yeah. All right. Okay. I go home now. Okay. So I got. Okay.
Good catch.
Good catch. Okay. I'm just wondering on the. I'm just going through my comments on your brief. When you state that you've already audited certain aspects of whether it be the National Defense or Halifax. Here it says Halifax Airport Authority. Then you already disclose where you're going to be auditing the next 2 times. Are you not displaying your hand? Are you not playing your cards out?
We haven't made that decision yet.
Oh, you haven't?
On the next 2?
The next 2, because it says here you're going to be looking at the Treasury Board secretarials, and
But that is a study rather than an audit.
No,
Okay.
it's actually an audit. So we always inform the federal institution that we're going to audit them. Yes.
Combien de temps avant que vous les informez?
How long ahead of time? Well, it depends. We inform them at the very beginning of our process. We meet with them. We explain for the audit how long ahead. It depends on the length of the investigation, the number of institutions that we're covering. So you have no deadline as to when you will be tabling the results of these audits. Generally, we have a production calendar that we stick to quite closely. In the case of these 2 audits, we'll be beginning them this year. They will probably be published next year. These audits are accounted for each year. It's not when the report is issued that the expenditures are, no.
Use my authority to intervene before the courts when necessary. Are there not costs related to that?
Yes, there are.
And those would be in the estimates as well?
They're on the estimate. They are an estimate in the estimates that we but are included in the protection as opposed to the promotion category for our expenses.
Okay, and who would incur those costs? Would it be Department of Justice would help you out, or we'd have to hire outside consultants?
It depends on the case. We have one of the reasons why we've been able to attract and to keep such talented lawyers is that we are able to offer them the opportunity to appear in court. That sometimes larger institutions.
Well, so you may do it actually in-house and lawyers that work for the department.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
And our lawyers are not justice lawyers for
Okay.
exactly that reason.
Okay.
Because when they appear in court, if we are taking a federal institution to court, they are appearing with justice lawyers representing the other side. So it's very important that we are able to hire our own lawyers who work for us. Now,
so
there are occasions when we seek an outside legal opinion if there's an expert opinion that we need.
So all that would be costed in your estimates?
That's right.
Okay. I'll go straight to cost. I think Mr. Gourde alluded to it, but you went from 22 million to 20 million in 2013, and if I subtract the moving costs, you'll probably be around the same number as last year. So if you were able to cut your budget by 10%, why not another 10% for this year?
It would be, we went through a process quite carefully of hiring IBM to do an A-base review, and they identified certain areas where they felt that we were top-heavy as an organization, and we streamlined certain parts of the structure of the organization. And I think that we have been able to absorb some of the costs that we have had to undertake, like the upgrading of our technology system, by the careful management of those costs, and trim, as Madame Lagacé said. Eliminate some positions, not replace people when they retired or moved on. But I think at this point, if we were to take another cut of the kind that you mentioned, they would begin to have a direct impact on our ability to serve complainants.
Okay, that's what I want to know. None of the budget. There's no monies in the budget for programs. Like none of this money is for programs that are given to organizations?
No, we have no statutory ability to write checks to any organization.
Okay, and another question on the complaints. Again, I'm taking this off your presentation. You had 415 complaints, I think, last year, yes, from 2012 2013. And on your last sentence of the same paragraph, as of March 31st, 2013, only 69 of these files were still active. But you don't disclose how many were actually open in this fiscal year? Or is that the same fiscal?
That is the same. I mean, basically what you're referring to, that 469 you're referring to, is basically the backlog.
Okay.
And by Ghislaine mobilizing her branch and investing a great deal of effort, we were able to reduce that backlog of 469 down to
69. But what would be the normal complaint number in a year?
It's a bit lower this year than it's in the past, but it has generally gone fluctuated between 600 and 1,000 complaints, but there has been a slight decline. We don't have a clear explanation as to why there's been a slight decline in the number of complaints.
Is there one area, is there more complaints from the English community or English-speaking people or French-speaking people?
French-speaking people.
Because they can't get the service in French?
That's right.
Okay. And would they
Although there has been a decline in the number of those kinds of what we call Part 4 complaints, the service to the public complaints.
And then what happens, how do you determine whether a file has been closed? If the person can't get service in French, what's going to change all of a sudden that person will be able to get the service in French? I would assume in English Canada?
There is a particular process that the branch goes through to determine that a file is completed. And Suzanne, do you want to explain in more detail the...
Yeah, go ahead, Madame Charlebois,
Yeah,
and then we're
well-
going to go to Monsieur Trottier. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the role of the commissioner is to determine if the complaint is founded or not, and then he can make recommendations. So that's usually how the process is finalized. Or if we have what we call the facilitated resolution process, where we will not determine if the complaint is founded, but we will try to find a solution to the satisfaction of the complainant, and we work with the federal institution. And if they commit to resolve the situation or put some measures in place, then we're satisfied we can close the file at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. Monsieur Trottier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci d'être venu encore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. I do have a question on the estimates. There is the promotion of linguistic duality and the promotion of linguistic duality aside from internal services. Would these correspond to the investigations? Protection would be investigations, and promotion would be audits and studies. The audits are also part of protection. The investigation of complaints, the audits, and legal activity under our legal affairs branch, this all falls under protection of language rights. And then promotion would be communications, speeches, policies, visits, trips that I make to visit official language minority communities, publications, studies. So the studies are fall under promotion, and the audits fall under protection. Promotion is important work. I would imagine you respond to a number of requests from linguistic communities around the country. Yes, I deliver about 50 speeches per year. The studies that you carry out, how exactly does it work? How do you prioritize decision making? There are many options, right? Well, it's a part of the discussions we hold regularly. Mr. Giguère and his team come up with a set of proposed priorities for studies that is discussed at the executive committee. Sylvain, I don't know if you want to add a few words to that. Actually, we communicate with people within and outside of our organizations as to study subjects. We might have a number of them, and then we filter them, and there might be 10 or so left. We, of course, don't have the capacity to carry out 10 studies over 1 or 2 years, so we have to make a choice at the executive committee. It's perhaps 2 or 3 studies that we'll do per year. Are the studies sometimes chosen based on the complaints you receive? Not necessarily, no. Often, it's a part of our discussion on our strategic planning and our priorities we are going to establish over a 3-year term. We might make a decision or defer a decision based on our consultations with a community. Say, from time to time, we might have had an idea to do a study on a given aspect of the situation for Anglophone minorities in Quebec. And what we had heard, well, people just didn't think it was appropriate at the time. But today, they would agree that it would be useful for us to do a study on the problem of seniors in Anglophone communities in Quebec. So if it is a matter that affects communities, we engage in consultations with them so as not to impose anything on them that wouldn't be relevant to the needs of that community. Do you feel you have the resources you need to carry out the studies that fall under your mandate? We always have to make strategic choices. We would always like to do more. But given the budgetary constraints, I would say we're doing valuable work. when it comes to research and studies. I do have a question about your offices. You have an office here in the National Capital Region. You have 5 other offices regionally, Montreal, Toronto, Moncton, Winnipeg, Edmonton. What do these regional offices do? And how much staff do you have in these offices? 25 throughout the country, approximately, in the offices. They mostly work on the promotion side. These offices, the role of these offices has evolved over time in the regions. My predecessor identified a problem when investigators in the regions were carrying out investigations relating to complaints in the region. There seemed to be a fairness issue because these were investigators living in the communities, investigating federal institutions. It seemed as though there was perhaps a bit of a bias in favor of the community. So she decided that people should not conduct investigations in the regions they were living in. With the changes brought about by our role as ombudsman, we have changed our role to focus the regions on promotion. If investigators are not carrying out investigations in the regions, then why would they be in the regions? But there are people that contribute greatly. This is not something we decided overnight. You no longer will be working for us because these people, some of these people really contribute a great deal, even though they are in the regions. So it's a transition we're making towards the use, as to the use of these offices to with the federal institutions and the community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Trottier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent. I have a couple of small questions. First question is this one. In your presentation, you made a statement. The Office of the Commissioner has a budget of 23.9 million to support it in its mandate to 2013-2014. This amount includes 15.1 million in salary, which represents 72%. Now, when you are going to the programs, 6.5 million for protection of language rights, 6.7 for promotion of linguistic duality, and internal services another 6.7. That is not adding up for 23 million. It's much more. So I understand that you are speaking about the programs, but you are making this statement with the salaries, 15.1 million, 72%. Can you explain this difference?
The salaries are not separate from the activities to the extent that if the bulk of the expense that an analyst incurs doing an investigation is that analyst's salary. And similarly, somebody who is working on a study or doing parliamentary relations is not. We do not have program costs in the same way that a department has program costs. We don't operate programs. We don't fund programs in the community. So the bulk of our expenses are salary costs of people responding to complaints and people doing their work. But Nancy, do you want to elaborate on what the other 30% is?
But the other
23%. So you have 72%, 15.1 million for salaries, only the salaries. So now you allocate it for 72%. What the other 28%?
The other percentage is used to run the programs and run the office. So, for example, the next biggest investment for the office in terms of its budget is in professional services. We use those professional services for internal services purposes, whether we need to do a threat and risk analysis for the office or we need to develop new policies to comply with Treasury Board requirements, for example. But it's also to run the office, whether it's paper, staplers, photocopiers, that kind of material as well, and other aspects such as travel and hospitality related to conferences or when we have meetings. That's what the other percentage covers.
Okay. When you established the three programs, protection of language rights, promotion of linguistic duality, and internal services, you made basically 30%. So can you explain a little bit more about the internal services? What do you mean by the internal services? I understand the programs, which is the protection of language rights. It is a very important issue. The promotion of linguistic duality, it is very important. But internal services, it is the expenses of your offices?
It's the expenses of our offices, it's the human resources, it's finance, it's internal audit, it's access to information, it's the various support elements that enable us to do our work.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisu. Mr. Benskin.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you here. $120 million is allocated by the new roadmap in terms of citizenship and immigration into language training for economic immigrants. I'm assuming that's language training in the majority language, I would assume, for the most part, no?
I'm making the same assumption, but I'm waiting to see the details. But I have exactly the same question myself about the relationship of that 120 million to the goals and objectives of the roadmap.
Okay, so well then my follow-up question is, and you kind of answered it, but what in the, I guess in the promotion capacity, what type of sums or what kind of action is being taken to ensure that new arrivals, and I'm speaking particularly in the West, have access to the second language and training in terms of one of the challenges that we have as a country is that while there is a constitutional right clearly defined in Article 23 of the right to access to minority language education, there is no constitutional right to second language education. And the result is that there's very uneven access for people for language training in the other official language, and you raise the fact that this 120 million has been identified as part of the roadmap. The roadmap has gone through a change of name from being a roadmap for linguistic duality to be a roadmap for official languages, which I assume is the reason why this funding, which is about funding the learning of what I, like you, assume is the majority language, I have certain questions as to whether that really is in continuity with the goals and objectives of the previous roadmap. The roadmap was renewed, and the figure went from 1.1 billion to 1.124 billion, which is a 1.3% increase. If you subtract that 120 million, you're looking at a 9.5% decrease in funding for the previous programs. So, like you, I have some questions as to what purpose that 120 million is going to go to, and what the relationship is to the original goals of the roadmap that this purports to be renewing. Thank you. For me, it seems like a bit of a contradiction in what the official languages is supposed to be, because if people coming in from another country wish to learn the second official language in the West, assuming it's French, but don't have that opportunity or not supported in that quest to learn the second language, how does that help the promotion of French in the West if the largest growing part of the population is immigration? All I can say is I think that's an extremely good question. I will be taking note of it.
Thank you. And just a quick discussion about minority press. And your predecessor, and I believe 2003, 2005, had put out 2 studies talking about the importance and laying out recommendations about the importance of minority press. And we're seeing in print, in particular, a rather disturbing decrease in the amount of advertisement taken out in minority press newspapers, particularly community newspapers, in the minority official languages. Have you been following that? Is that something that concerns you?
Thank you, Mr. Benskin. Mr. Fraser?
I am concerned about the state of the minority press because I think the minority press plays a critical role in the vitality of minority language communities. And one of the things that I have noted and have become very aware of is that there has been a change in the criteria for funding small community newspapers that depend upon the post office to distribute their publication. And this has had a very deleterious effect on, particularly on La Liberté in Winnipeg, or in Manitoba, because it serves the entire province. So it's the minority press is not unique in facing an advertising problem. The written press everywhere in North America is facing particular challenges, but I think that the written press plays still an extremely important role for the vitality of minority language communities. I think it's important that that role be recognized and supported.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Toole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Fraser. Thank you for your report today.
On the estimates, but my colleague, Madame Michaud, decided to bring more political issues into this, and I thought I'd take advantage of the clarity you might be able to provide. While I was in the Air Force, I had the good pleasure of serving at a rescue coordination center in Trenton, Ontario, with the Coast Guard and with Air Force officials, many of whom were Francophone. So in the House, the ministers repeatedly said that language services will be a priority. But on that issue, as the Official Languages Commissioner, I'm wondering if you could comment on the geography of a location. When I was at Trenton, our rescue center had responsibility for Ontario, parts of Western Canada, and the Arctic. And certainly, I think, from a language perspective, the priority would be service in both languages for people in distress, whether the call was in Trenton or Halifax or Victoria. From your point of view, is it really that language service that's a priority, and not necessarily the location that the bilingual or francophone or anglophone Coast Guard official or Air Force official is present?
I'm a little hesitant to answer in detail because these are some of the issues that we are dealing with specifically in our follow-up to the recommendations that we did on our investigation to the proposal to move the search and rescue center. What I would say is that I think that it is critical that when vessels are in distress, that the people who are on the other end of the radio are able to understand them, and that time is of the essence. As you know from your own experience, a successful rescue is often a matter of being able to respond in seconds or minutes rather than hours, and so a clear understanding of what is being said by somebody who is in a position of extreme stress is extremely important.
You made a very good point, thank you. And the example of a vessel is a good one, because obviously a vessel, whether at sea or lake or on a river, would be using radio or cellular through to a coordination center, whether that's Trenton, Halifax. In my experience, having worked in Trenton with some outstanding Francophone Royal Canadian Air Force officers, we had that ability, but I think the Minister has said it's good to ensure that consistency across the country. Getting back to estimates, and your presentation, the only two remaining questions in the amount of time I have, so I'll put both of them out there, is there was some discussion about reductions internally, I think travel and other things. I'm wondering if you could provide a little more detail, and is that reducing travel between your offices, your regional offices? My second question is in relation to your outreach to the summer games and summer festivals, which I think is admirable and very innovative. My question there is, do you proactively look at what events might be happening of a national nature across the country, or are many of these organizations coming to you, and how is that communication going?
It's a bit of a combination of both. I mean, one of the things that this was one of the results of our work on the Olympics, is that we, following the Olympics, we produced a publication that has a checklist of things that organizations need to take into account if they're going to be able to deliver their events in both official languages. And there is a publication within the publication, literally a tear out, and the person who is responsible for the Canada Game language issues at the Canada Games in Sherbrooke said he found this very valuable. He literally has it pinned on his bulletin board beside his desk. Our Montreal office has been working very closely with the organizers of the Canada Games in Sherbrooke. I'll be there for the opening. Other people will be there throughout the games. Similarly, from the outset, I've had a series of meetings, and our people have had a series of meetings with the organizers of the Pan American Games in 2015. It's been a very collaborative relationship. I think that they've found it useful, we've found it useful, and so we have been looking ahead at the various events that are coming down the pipe, and we'll, whenever there's an announcement that there's going to be some kind of event, we say, is there a role, we should be in touch with somebody so that they are able to take advantage of the experiences that we've acquired and now working with these different organizations. In terms of reducing expenses, one of the things that we now have, which we didn't have for a long time, is a capacity to do audiovisual links to our regional offices, so that whereas in the past to have a meeting that would include people in the regions, we had more often than is the case now, they would fly to Ottawa for a meeting. Now it's much easier just to punch them up on a screen and to have that meeting. Oh. My own travel expenses, even though I am traveling as much, if not more, my travel expenses have dropped over the years because I have made a point of flying economy rather than
Thank
flying
you.
executive, and the difference in cost is significant.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Dion Labelle.
Yes, good afternoon to the entire team, and congratulations for your work. I just would like to come back to the Search and Rescue Center. You had shared your concerns with us as an official of Parliament, and the Auditor General also raised concerns. So we have here two independent officers of Parliament who share the same concerns with regard to adequate bilingual service provided by a Search and Rescue Center. I think that because of that, we can reasonably deduct that there's a problem. That said, I greatly appreciated your presentation, Mr. Fraser. I see that you have worked very hard and that you will work very hard. This year, you will produce reports on transfers to provinces, the Halifax Airport Authority, and others. I think we will look forward to studying all of these reports. The role of Treasury Board Secretariat, Air Canada, Industry Canada. But that's not the end of it. 3 other studies are coming down the pipes, one on the judiciary, one on training in the public service, and one on Governor General appointments. I think that you are an inspiration to us in terms of work ethic. Now, in your report on plans and priorities, you say at point 2.1 that you are trying to chart trends on government cutbacks on the advancement of linguistic duality. Obviously, we are in an era of cutbacks. We've heard from Minister Moore, and investment at Heritage Canada will go down in minority official languages communities. How are you going to follow up on that? Will you produce a report on how cutbacks are affecting the government's language obligations? Well, in fact, this is a continual concern that we have, and we integrate this concern into our analysis on work carried out by departments. That, in fact, is something we will study. And I think we're conducting an audit of Treasury Board, I believe. Yes, an audit of Treasury Board and its role in instructions given to federal departments with regard to cuts. When are we going to receive that report? Maybe not this year, but next year.
We'll be getting the audit report this year. It will be audit report, obviously, will be made public. We also have a number of complaints files that we are finalizing. Those won't be published, but we hope we'll be able to analyze the complaints files as a whole, and the Commissioner may be able to issue a public release on that. We're certainly awaiting those impatiently. If I look at the same document, plans and priorities, are you hoping to get a response? 60% from these departments with respect to your recommendations. It doesn't strike me as a large number. That it seems to me that the departments are not reacting to your recommendations, or what exactly is going on? No, I wouldn't say that. I would say we developed an analysis grid for the results of our recommendations. In some cases, we can say they were agreed to or accepted, others partially so, and some not at all, not yet. So there is some leeway there, if you will. As to recommendations that have not been implemented within a given year, but could be, would you like to see a larger number than 60%? You seem to be saying 60% is sufficient or okay. Why not set 80%? Good question. We'll think about that. Perhaps we were too generous. Perhaps we didn't require enough from them. I think you need to. Do I still have some time? Last time you were here, we were looking at this study, Language of Work in Private Companies Under Federal Jurisdiction. This was the Minister of Industry who had issued this report. What are the findings of your report on that? We hadn't conducted a formal study, but Sylvain, perhaps you can say something. to that? Well, we did go through it. We do not have enough data to, sorry about that feedback. So if we want additional information, we'll have to do our own research. That's the outcome of that. Thank you. Mr. Galipo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Fraser, you and your assistant commissioners as well. I greatly appreciate the cooperation established between this committee and the Official Languages Commissioner, institutionally and also personally. Unless I'm mistaken, you've appeared before this committee at least 30 times since 2006? Probably, yes. A half dozen times per year. Okay, so I have a personal question to ask you. The move, your office's relocation, was this something that is done to be for you to be enable you to be more effective on the other side of the river? Actually, there are a number of reasons. It was an opportunity that arose, allowing us to be co-located with the other agents of or officers of Parliament. Two of our colleagues were forced to move. It was Public Works and Treasury Board. It was an opportunity as well because we're instituting new workplace standards for the future for the entire public service. And I thought to myself, well, this is an opportunity to potentially work together and share services with my colleagues, other officers of Parliament also. If we were to have to comply with the new workforce or workplace standards, it would be easier for the Office of the Commissioner to do so in a new office, in a new building, than to make changes within the existing building we were located in. Public Works has this new standard, 2.0, and Public Works felt it was important for us to get involved in the process. There's also a very clear message from the government that requires that institutions or offices of Parliament look at the consequence or the potential for shared services. And there is an issue as to our independence if we have to share services with departments that we are supposed to oversee or audit. That being said, we can share services with other officers of Parliament and protect our independence. I understand, and I greatly appreciate your response. You're here with 3 assistant commissioners. How many are there? They're here. I thought it was like Radio-Canada, CBC, where there are 26 vice presidents of the corporation. On the issue of promotion of linguistic duality or official languages, or the issue of living in a minority setting, I've done that my entire life. Certainly that was the case for me. And I think we have to be very cautious about what we say publicly. As far as the roadmap is concerned, it was released a month ago, and it is 40% more generous than the previous government's. You've got the results from about 30 personal consultations with communities throughout this country. Actually, consultations held with the minister. This roadmap is as a direct result of what he himself learned from consultations with these linguistic minority communities. And I can assure you, if you don't already know, that the money that is earmarked for recent immigrants or immigrant communities, that is as a result of the fact that these communities have expressed a desire to have access to the minority language. For instance, Asian community members arriving in Vancouver, they are willing to camp out for an entire night in front of immersion schools in Vancouver to have access to not second language education, not the majority language, but rather the minority language. Why? Because they understand that in their desire to become full-fledged Canadians, they want to really be fluent in both languages. The money earmarked specifically for that is found in the roadmap. On that point, bravo. It wasn't quite clear in the drawing up of that $120 million. That was, there were some, I had some concerns, but if that is the case, if it is for language training in both official languages, as you say, there are some figures that came out yesterday from the census that are showing that immigrants to Canada are more bilingual in our two official languages than English Canadians. English.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Galipeau. Madame Quash.
Merci à vous tous de nous faire le bonheur de venir.
Thank you for your presentations here today. Given that you're discussing immigration, in fact, I will continue along in the same vein. According to a national investigation with households, an investigation by Statistics Canada, published yesterday, there's not one single Francophone country among the 10 major source countries for immigration for Canada. Do you have anything to say about that, given the fact that you promote both official languages? I think it's very important for official language minority communities to have access to Francophone immigrants. In the past, there were very specific targets. Stating that French-speaking immigration in provinces outside of Quebec represent at least the percentage of, or the ratio of the population that speaks French in that given province. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to arrive at that figure. There are programs aiming to recruit Francophone immigrants, such as, for instance, Destination Canada or Destination Canada. They reach out to France, Belgium, perhaps the Maghreb also. I think that's a significant contribution for the vitality of official language minority communities, Francophone minority communities. You were referring to targets that hadn't been met. There's a Francophone immigration target of 1.8%. It's been set by Citizenship and Immigration. I find that's really quite low. We had consulted with communities, or communities had been consulted on this issue, but what about those communities that had asked for a 4.4% target? You say that there are recruitment programs for Francophones, Francophone immigrants. Do you think there's a lack of funding for this type of recruitment program? I know that the provincial appointment or nominee program was transferred from the provinces to Ottawa, much to the dismay of Manitoba. Manitoba had used this provincial nominees program to really stress the importance of having Francophone immigrants to the province. This is an example that I often quote, an example of a cooperation between Citizenship and Immigration and the province of Manitoba as well as the Franco-Manitoban community. I believe this cooperation is ongoing, that there are some signs of success for these immigrants. Some of these immigrants came to the country 8 years ago, and they've been a real sign of success. They are integrated within with the Francophone communities in Manitoba. And we can see that there's a spirit of cooperation there. Very well. I think we agree on the fact that there is a lack of funding and resources in this area. On another point, in your report on plans and priorities 2013-2014, you set 40% as the target for formal investigations that need to be resolved over 175 working days. That's one investigation out of two. Is it because there's a lack of resources? If you wanted to increase the number of investigations in that time frame, I will ask Ghislaine to perhaps add something to my response, but I would say it has more to do with the complexity of complaints, the reluctance of some departments to respond within a given timeline. Anything, you were referring to the reluctance of some departments? Does that often happen? No, generally we get good cooperation from federal institutions. The 50% target was established based on the large number of cases that are still in arrears. Can you tell us how many exactly? Today, 100 cases that are over 2 years old, 100 that are between 1 and 2 years old, and the rest of the cases or caseload are under 1 year old. So that would essentially be our target, to have a reasonable number of cases to deal with, so that we could, in 100% of cases, we could comply with our standards, 175 days. How many investigators do you have, and would you need more investigators to complete these cases? Well, as we said, a few years ago, we reviewed voted accreditations. We wanted to make sure that we would have additional resources so that we could reduce the arrears. And we will be receiving these resources. We'll be hiring people. How many? About 5. Temporary. This should allow us to really reduce our backlog and meet our standards, service standards. Instead of having a 50% target, we could have a higher target. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses that are here today. I have a couple of questions, but first of all, a couple of comments. Of course, France is, I think, Canada's 6th or 5th largest trading partner, and in fact, France made one of the largest investments in Canada in Total, the oil and gas company that's located in my riding, which I'm very proud to say, along with in my riding also is the oldest Francophone community in Alberta, which is Plamondon, which is full of many Francophones. No. No. Everybody wants to be my constituent, though I'm not surprised. One thing that has been of interest to me, I've been trying to learn French for some time, and I've been here now almost 9 years in June. And I moved to Quebec while I'm here 8 years ago. In fact, I like to say that I have the perfect life. I sleep in Quebec, work in Ontario, and pay taxes in Alberta. Conservative governments for generations have made sure that I can do that and pay low taxes. In fact, it's odd to believe, but I actually pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 a year less taxes than some of my colleagues on both sides of the House here, just because I live in Alberta.
I didn't want to depress anybody saying that, but I do want to say that Alberta has a tax advantage there, and some other provinces should consider it. But during my period of time in Quebec, I've been trying to learn French, and one thing I've noticed is that closed caption TV is something I utilize a lot. And when I watch English programming, I have closed caption on, and when I watch French programming, I have closed caption on. But I've noticed that the availability of French closed caption is not available when there's an English program on. So when somebody speaks in, for instance, news in English, I can catch in French, for instance, 70% of the words, and I understand and I can put the story together if I get the pictures. But I noticed that, in fact, the technology is there. I did some research on this. The technology is there for 2 closed caption programming. So if you have a programmer giving news in English, they could actually have closed caption to have French and English, so you could follow in both languages. And I'm not sure if anything's ever been done in that area. I myself did a lot of research on it, and I discovered that it only costs programmers about $35 to have the extra closed caption programming on, so they could have dual closed caption in both English and French. And it could actually be required that programmers across Canada would have to have that as a requirement. But my question to you, because I couldn't find any empirical evidence proving my theory, is has there been any studies to indicate whether or not, first of all, that would be a successful method by which people could learn the other language, which I think it would be, and secondly, whether or not there could be an advantage there for cultural exchange? Certainly, when I started to learn French, I understood more about my Francophone colleagues. I frankly understood more about their position on French language, on culture, on different priorities that they have compared to Albertans, and I wanted to do that before I could vote properly on anything here. So, Mr. Fraser, have you heard of something like this? And if so, what have the studies shown?
I'm intrigued by your comment and by the research that you've done on this. To the best of my knowledge, we have not done any research on this subject. The nearest thing that I can think of that is, and it's not a direct comparison, but Finland has the highest literacy rate in the OECD. And one explanation that I have read for that is that in contrast with a lot of other European countries, they do not dub any of their English language programs. They run subtitles. And so there is an incentive for young children who are watching their favorite programs to be able to understand the subtitles. And then ultimately it helps them learn English as well. I mean, it's always amazing the degree of trilingualism of Scandinavians. But that's the only, and I don't even have a formal reference for you, but it's one of the explanations that I've seen for why Finland has has the highest literacy rate in the OECD, is their use of Finnish language subtitles on English language programming.
My next question would be, has my conversation intrigued you enough to do additional research on this to find out whether or not the empirical data would substantiate my theory?
It's something that I will bring back and we will discuss, but I've learned not to make any spontaneous commitments to involving our research resources before seeing what our commitments already are.
You sound like you're more of a politician than a... But, very good. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madame Michaud.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I wanted to get back to this issue of $120 million for the roadmap. At the NDP, it remains unclear what the government's intentions are on that front. I would like to be able to share your slight optimism, sir, but unfortunately, we are seeing cutbacks, 9% in the roadmap. So that $120 million that would be transferred would be removed. I'm not sure what the use will be for this roadmap, but we're still expecting Minister Kenney before the committee, and hopefully we'll get some clarification as to the situation, we hope. Now, to get back to your presentation, I do have a question regarding the $3.3 million added to the main estimates for you to be able to relocate to Gatineau. According to the information we have here, your budget had increased, but you're actually saying that it's a loan that you received. Okay. And the reimbursement will come out of what budgetary item in your commissioner's office? It would be under management services, but it's over a 9-year term. Okay, you think this could be detrimental to your capacity to investigate or do your work? No, I don't think so. It's a rather interesting initiative. It's one of the first times that we've decided to operate in this way. Our colleagues, the commissioners for the Privacy Commissioner, have not seen this type of... They're also received a loan. So I guess we'll see, based on our experience of this. Yes, exactly. I think it was, however, an important step. In support of the independence of officers of Parliament. Thank you. I'll move on to other subjects. I have 2 other questions for you. In fact, 3 if I can get them all in. 2 questions, yes or no answer if you can. The investigation you conducted on the complaint regarding the appointment of the Auditor General, it's a unilingual Anglophone, is that still open? Yes, it is. Okay, then we'll get back to that in a moment. Another question? Another case that ended up at your office, those unilingual cards used by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, did he say he would stop using his unilingual business cards? That he will stop using these unilingual cards. We have yet to receive a response from the Minister. This was a preliminary report that was sent to the institution. But there's not been a response? To my knowledge, no.
Well, I see the answer is no, and I'll quickly put my 3rd question before I run out of time. You were there when I tabled my notices of motion at the beginning of the meeting. So to follow up on the motion I tabled with regard to senior officials, 2 government officials, the Conservative majority decided not to take any action with regard to the Officers of Parliament letter which was sent to Parliament. How do you react to that? Do you think that there's a lack of respect towards parliamentary officers of Parliament, rather? Well, our hope was, as officers of Parliament, is that the pilot project, which considered the request for funding of the officers, would be made permanent. But that was not the case. That did not happen. So we were left empty-handed, if you will. However, there are other things we said in the letter. The letter was the response of all officers of Parliament to another letter which had been written by the President of Treasury Board. He wanted assurances that an embarrassing event or incident would not be repeated. Were there sufficient measures over the activities of the officers to make sure that this kind of incident did not happen again? And so in our letter, we had clearly stated that, yes, absolutely, we do have accountability processes when we appear before a committee, for instance. We produce reports, we conduct internal verifications, internal audits, and in fact, throughout my mandate, we received approval from the Auditor General. And what we also said is that it was important to have a careful process, a process to carefully appoint officers of Parliament. We haven't received a formal response to our letter. I don't know how officers are appointed, But that was what we were trying to get at, or rather, that's how we responded to the first letter. That said, I'd be willing to answer any questions the committee might have if the committee decided to have me appear again with regard to that letter. Mr. Gould? Mr. Commissioner, I'd like to congratulate you because you're often put tricky questions by the opposition members and who tried to be partisan, but you've always given independent, good answers, and I'd like to commend you for that. Now, I'd like to come back to the issue of the number of complaints and how long it takes to investigate them. You said that the number of complaints has decreased over the years, and this has helped bring your costs in line. When did you see that the trend was downward? Yes, I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, we've received fewer complaints. Nothing's really significant, but definitely, yes, there's been a decrease. What do you think this decrease in complaints is due to? Programs implemented by the government, the effectiveness of the last roadmap, or why? I mean, surely there's a reason why you're receiving fewer complaints. Well, it's difficult to say. Maybe it's because institutions live up to their obligations better. Maybe it's because people are cynical. When people talk about linguistic rights, it really doesn't make headlines, so people might not be aware of their language rights. You can interpret this trend either in a positive or in a negative way. I don't have an answer as to why the trend is downwards. You said that when you conducted your investigations, generally some departments improved their ratings. And if this is the case, and if services to Canadians have improved, one could lead to conclude that this is why there are fewer complaints. Well, actually, yes, absolutely. And I've always seen a relationship between those two things. That is, between our role in promoting language rights and our role in protecting them. So if we promote language rights, people will be more aware of their own responsibilities. And there will be fewer cases where Canadians' rights are not respected. So definitely there is a real connection between those two things. Do you think that, or rather, if government overall is doing a better job, it shows that there is political will to respect the language rights of all Canadians in our various speeches to the throne. We have always claimed this, and I think the message has gotten across to Canadians. They are more aware of their language rights, and we're giving better services. So this is probably a good thing. Well, in fact, that's something I can say. From one government to the next, there is continuing respect for official languages. No government has ever abandoned the principles of official languages, the principles contained in the Act. So there is continuity there. That said, of course, we still face challenges in certain areas within the federal government. Some organizations have more trouble with language rights than others, but I think it's a matter of leadership. When there are new leaders, new people head up a department, and when they see that there are problems, sometimes they'll take action to fix the problem, and when that's the case, the effects are seen immediately. However, the opposite also is true. A message can also be sent from above that languages are not a priority. And when that happens, there are other types of changes that take place. Well, thank you, Mr. Fraser. Thank you for confirming that our country is on the right track for language duality. Monsieur Dion Labelle, well, I'm not going to ask you whether that is actually what you said. I'm always astounded at hearing Mr. Gould accuse us of being partisanship, but Brian Jean has just asked questions on taxes, and he's happy that in Quebec they pay $10,000 less than we do in Quebec. Well, when Alberta brings about $7 a day daycare and pharmacare, well, let's talk then. I think that what Mr. Gould said is completely out of place. Anyhow, let's come back to the Commissioner. The quality of translation. Le Devoir was saying that departments are reducing the number of internal documents to be translated, that francophones are being asked to draft papers in English. And you and Mr. Graham Fraser, apparently you met the leader of the Union for Professional Employers within the public service. Can you tell us about that meeting? Yes, well, the head of that union shared his concerns, and I shared mine. And I think I said before the committee last time that it's the kind of situation where it's sometimes difficult to find written evidence of a specific directive that may have been issued by a public servant. There are unwritten ways of getting a message across. So perhaps the message was sent that there was no time for translation, that the minister's cabinet wants to see a document as soon as possible. And we know that even if a minister is bilingual, his staff might not be. Are you saying that there are documents today which are not being translated, but which used to be translated? Do you have any numbers to that effect, if that's the case? I don't have any numbers, but the Translation Bureau is concerned with what's going on. Are you going to follow up with them? Yes, I will. I'll try to do that. But as I said, and in fact you raise a good point, just to establish the number of documents which were translated 5 years ago as opposed to the number being translated today, it's very difficult to establish. Thank you. I have another question which is not partisan at all. Let me talk about Statistics Canada. Now, StatsCan, when they published their data, they said that the 2011 census data on language was of good quality. StatsCan now has just said that they have to be careful as to how their data, well, how the data is to be interpreted between 2006 and 2011. Or rather, that data is good, but you have to be careful in interpreting it. Now, the Treasury Board Secretariat and the Department of Heritage use that information to develop public policy. Aren't you concerned with the wording of Statistics Canada? Well, in fact, this confirms the concerns I expressed at the time when the long-form census was abolished. Some questions were transferred from the long-form to the short-form census, but you might know that we received complaints. But it's clear it's not the institution itself, Statistics Canada, which was at fault. You can see so today Statistics Canada spokespeople are very, very careful with regard to the most recent data, and they say that the data should be interpreted very carefully as well. Yesterday, the former head of Statistics Canada, Munir Sheikh, wrote a piece and spoke about the danger of how these data will be used. Are you going to make recommendations with regard to Statistics Canada with regard to the questions you would like to see included in the census so that you can keep on doing your work, so you can better understand language trends in the country? Thank you, Mr. Dion-Labelle. Well, that's something we've thought about, but we haven't completely analyzed the data which was published yesterday. I mean, after all, they came out yesterday. But of course, we will take a closer look at them, and we'll think about what to do.
Mr. Benskin.
Thank you. The last little bit of discussion, just kind of raises some questions in my mind into as to the importance, and what I'm hearing shows me that there's a growing importance to the role that you and your office in particular plays in terms of interpretation as well as enforcement or awareness of official language rules. I'm a bit concerned about the issue with Statistics Canada, and I just want to quickly. You said that you had to relieve 17 people, I think, of their positions in this last. Was it 17, 12 people in the last adjustment in terms of your inner workings?
It was a very gradual process over the last 3 or 4 years. So, okay. We were able to do it with considerable precision. It was not a matter of massive.
Oh, that's not. It's just you had also mentioned that you're in the process of hiring 5 new caseworkers. I'm assuming. Right. What's the average caseload per caseworker in your office?
There's actually no average caseload because it always depends on the complexity of the files. Mm-hmm. So it's not a number of files. It's more the analyst work. They have specific institutions they're responsible for. And for example, if we don't get any complaints for some institutions, those analysts will help on other files. But it's difficult to actually establish a specific caseload. So,
with those 5 additional caseworkers, you'll be able to catch up on the backlog?
That's the plan, because they will work on the old files, so the actual analysts will concentrate on the actual files that we receive within the year.
Okay. And in terms of the decrease, I would just as a comment, would like to just sort of put out there that even though there is a decrease, it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't mean that the work that you're doing becomes less, or the need for what you do becomes less important. I think, like anything else, like crime or whatever, just because crime may be on the downswing for a particular period, we don't take policemen off the streets. So with that, I'd like to thank you as well. I add my voice to thanking you for and your team for the work that you do. You do it very effectively, and we hope we can continue to support you in the work that you're doing, you and your office, and the work that you're doing in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you to all members for your questions on the estimates. I'll have 2 votes to conduct right now. So shall vote 20 under Privy Council carry for the amount of $21,621,488. It's carried. Secondly, shall the Chair report the main estimates for 2013-2014 to the House. Carried. Thank you very much for your questions and testimony. Without further ado, this meeting is adjourned. 13 minutes over.